Okay, so let's start with a little thought experiment today.
All right, I'm ready.
If your house burns down because of faulty wiring, you'd call that an accident, right?
Right, of course.
But if an arsonist burns it down, you call it a crime.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, but what if the fire department comes over, watches it burn, and then they fine you for the smoke damage?
Wow, that is a terrifying image to start the day with.
It is, but it really gets to the heart of what we're unpacking in this deep dive. Today we're looking at a candid interview with Renske Leijten.
Right, the former SP member of parliament.
Exactly. For anyone following Dutch politics, she basically dedicated her entire career to unearthing the Childcare Benefit Scandal, the Toeslagen Scandal.
She was really the pit bull on this dossier. I mean,
Fair.
she wouldn't let go when everyone else just wanted to move on.
Yeah, and in this interview, she starts off by actually correcting the interviewer on a single word. He calls it the Toeslag affair, the benefits affair. And she stops him cold.
She refuses to use that word.
Refuses. She insists on scandal. And usually, when people argue about semantics, I kind of zone out. It feels like nitpicking. But why is this specific distinction the hill she's willing to die on here?
It's crucial because words frame our reality. Leijten argues that affair it's a soft, almost romantic word.
Right, like a love affair.
Exactly. An affair implies a relationship. It takes two to tango. It implies that maybe both sides made some mistakes. Maybe there was a misunderstanding or some secret agreement gone wrong. It suggests mutuality.
Right, like we had a messy affair. It spreads the blame around.
Precisely. And Leijten is totally adamant there was absolutely nothing mutual about this. This wasn't some dispute between citizens and the state.
No.
This was a unilateral attack. You had a state mechanism, a massive powered bureaucracy inflicting systemic harm on innocent citizens who had zero means to defend themselves. So she insists on scandal because a scandal implies a moral failure. It wasn't just a whoops moment, it was a design choice.
That sets the tone perfectly for what we're looking at. Because even though Leijten has left Parliament, she's out of The Hague now, after nearly 17 years, she is looking back at the wreckage and basically saying, we haven't fixed the machine that caused the fire.
Right. She calls the current situation her Stella hell.
Recovery hell.
Yeah, which sounds incredibly bleak.
It sounds like the worst movie sequel ever. So our mission today for you listening is to understand why, years after the government literally fell over this issue, we are stuck in this recovery hell.
We need to unpack what she calls the culture of looking away.
Yes, the double standards for the elite versus the regular citizen, and why the bureaucracy seems just physically incapable of fixing its own mess.
And to understand that mess, you really have to look at the class divide. This is where Leijten sharpens her knives in the interview. She talks about a double standard that is just baked into the Dutch system.
She gives a very specific example that highlights this, the case of Natalie van Berkel.
Right. This is a perfect illustration of how the rules work differently depending on your zip code and your job title. Natalie van Berkel was intended to be a state secretary.
A very high-ranking position.
Very high. But she had to step down because it turned out her CV was, well, let's say, creative.
She lied about her education, right?
She misrepresented a title she didn't actually have. Now, in the real world, if you lie on a job application, you get fired.
Immediately.
But Van Berkel was part of the ABD, the General Administrative Service. This is the elite core of the civil service, the top managers who just kind of rotate between ministries.
People who actually run the country while the politicians are doing interviews on TV.
Exactly. And Leijten points out that when someone in that specific circle makes a mistake or even outright lies, the system reacts with empathy.
There's a soft hand.
Yes, very soft hand. They might lose that specific appointment, but they usually land safely in another high-paying role within the administration. It's treated as just a career hiccup, a learning moment.
Okay, now contrast that with the victims of the benefit scandal.
It's night and day.
If a regular citizen made a minor error in their paperwork, and we are even talking about lying here, just missing a receipt or ticking the wrong box, what happened?
Total destruction. Zero tolerance. They were labeled as fraudsters immediately.
Right.
They were fined tens of thousands of euros. Their wages were garnished. Their cars were seized. There was no soft hand. There was an iron fist.
It's brutal.
Leijten argues this exposes a culture of looking away at the top. The elite demand absolute perfection from the citizenry, rules are rules. But for their own circle, they expect forgiveness. They expect second chances.
It really validates that cynical feeling you get that the game is completely rigged. If the people enforcing the rules don't play by them, the social contract is broken.
Exactly.
But Leijten goes deeper than just pointing fingers at bad politicians. She talks about the civil servants themselves. And this is the part I really find hardest to wrap my head around.
It's complex.
We aren't talking about cartoon villains here. We're talking about thousands of normal people, neighbors, parents, people who just work for the government. How do they end up participating in a system that crushes human lives?
This is maybe the most fascinating psychological part of her whole analysis. Leijten doesn't demonize them.
No.
She says it's a systemic design flaw rooted in a culture of fear, an angst culture. You have to look at the incentives. Like, what gets you a promotion in the civil service?
I would assume doing your job well.
But how is well defined in that environment? It's defined by process. Did you execute the task? Did you check all the boxes? Did you clear the file off your desk?
Right.
If yes, you are a good employee. You are not rewarded for looking at the human consequences of your task. In fact, looking at the human consequences is actually dangerous.
Dangerous how? Like for your career?
Exactly. If you're the one civil servant who stands up and says, wait a minute, if we enforce Rule 14b here, this family will be homeless and that feels wrong, you aren't given a medal for empathy.
You're a problem.
You are labeled difficult. You are slowing down the process.
So the system filters out empathy. It actively selects for obedience to the process.
Leijten uses this brilliant metaphor here. She compares the government organization to a cookie factory.
Okay.
Imagine this massive factory. The machines are humming, the conveyor belts are moving incredibly fast, the boxes are being packed perfectly. Everyone inside is high-fiving because the efficiency metrics are just through the roof.
The factory is running perfectly.
But nobody is tasting the cookies. And as Leijten puts it, the cookies are inedible.
They're poison.
They are. But the system is designed to keep the factory running, not to ensure the product is actually good for people. And if you try to stop the assembly line to say the cookies taste bad, the system attacks you.
She gives a really specific example of this attack regarding Eva Gonzalez Perez, right?
Yes. Eva is the lawyer who really broke this case open. She was representing the victims when literally nobody else cared. And Leijten reveals that within the tax authority, there were explicit instructions not to talk to her.
They blacklisted the whistleblower.
Worse, they isolated her completely. The objection department labeled her difficult. They referred to her as the wife of that fraudster.
Unbelievable.
They created this wall around her to prevent her complaints from disrupting the factory flow. It's an autoimmune response. The bureaucracy protects itself from criticism much more fiercely than it protects citizens from harm.
That is such a depressing insight. But it totally explains why, even after the government resigned, we are still in this recovery hell. You'd think, okay, the scandal is out, everyone apologized on TV, now we just fix it.
You would think that.
But Leijten notes there are still between 35,000 and 40,000 victims waiting for help, affecting 100,000 children. Why is it taking so long?
This brings us to the actual mechanics of the failure. Leijten describes a bureaucratic phenomenon she calls upnipping. In English, we'd probably call it salami slicing.
Okay, walk me through this. How do you salami slice a recovery process?
So imagine you're a victim. You want your money back and your record cleared. In a sane world, one person would open your file, verify your story, and just fix it.
Right.
But in recovery hell, that process is chopped into tiny, disconnected slivers.
Let me guess.
Right.
One person handles the initial phone call.
Exactly. One official handles the intake. That is their only job. Then they pass the file to another building where someone else does a legal check.
Okay.
Then they pass it to a third person who calculates the compensation. A fourth person handles the objection if you disagree with the amount.
And I assume none of these people ever talk to each other.
Rarely.
Yeah.
And crucially, no single person actually owns the result.
Yeah.
If your case takes 3 years to resolve, nobody is responsible because everyone did their tiny slice of the salami perfectly.
Wow.
The intake was done on time. The calculation was mathematically accurate. The result is zero resolution for the victim, but the process was flawless. It's the cookie factory all over again.
It sounds like a nightmare designed by Kafka.
It gets worse. Leijten points out that this immense inefficiency has spawned what we can call the consultant economy.
Oh boy.
The government realized they couldn't handle the volume of cases, so they hire external staff, an absolute army of consultants. But here's the kicker. How do you think they're paid?
Please don't say they're paid by the hour.
They are paid by the hour.
Oh, come on. That is perverse incentive 101.
Right. I mean, if you hire a contractor to renovate your kitchen, you agree on a price and a deadline. They want to finish quickly so they can get paid and go to the next job.
Naturally.
But here, the agreement is simply to process files. If you are paid by the hour to process paperwork, you have a financial incentive to be thorough, slow, and endless. You do not have a financial incentive to actually close the file.
So we are burning taxpayer money to pay consultants to slowly push paper around while the actual victims are still drowning.
Leijten is furious about this. She notes that the government points to the millions they are spending on execution costs and says, look how hard we're trying, look how much money we're spending.
But they're spending it on themselves.
Exactly, on their own systems and their own consultants, not on the victims.
Speaking of victims getting fed up, there was one story in the source material that really stood out. The story of Jasmine Moleman. This felt like a scene from a movie.
It really does. Jasmine is a victim who is entitled to compensation. The state admits it. She is owed up to 15,000 euros.
Right.
But the deadlines just kept passing. We'll pay you next month. Oh, sorry, administrative delay. Just endless stalling.
So what did she do?
She went to the Ministry of Finance, walked into the building, and seized a statue.
She literally repossessed government property.
She took it as collateral. She basically said, you owe me money, you don't pay, so I'm taking this asset.
That is incredible. And what does Leijten say about that? Because Leijten was a lawmaker for 17 years. Usually, MPs don't encourage citizens to go loot government buildings.
Not Renske Leijten. Not on this issue. She cheered it on. She practically gave a standing ovation in the interview. She said, I wish victims had seized ministers' cars or salaries years ago. She thinks maybe if the elite had felt the pain personally, the problem would have been solved way faster.
It's a total Robin Hood moment.
Yeah.
But it highlights the profound desperation. You have to physically heist a statue to get the government to follow its own laws?
And the state's response to people like Jasmine reveals maybe the darkest part of this whole interview. The state doesn't just delay. Sometimes it actively fights back.
Yeah, she shines a light on the use of the lands advocate.
The state attorney. Now, for you listening outside the Netherlands, the lands advocate isn't just some regular government lawyer.
No, it's a very big deal.
It is a prestigious, incredibly expensive, high-powered private law firm that essentially creates a massive firewall for the state.
Right.
Leijten highlights the profound power imbalance here. You have a citizen, usually financially ruined by the state, just trying to get justice. And the state uses that citizen's own tax money to hire the most expensive sharks in the country to crush them in court.
It feels incredibly cruel.
Yeah.
It's bullying on a national scale.
It's also financially absurd. Leijten points out that in many cases, it costs the state more money to hire the state attorney to fight the case than it would to simply settle and pay the victim what they're asking for.
That makes zero sense.
They might spend 50,000 euros in legal fees just to avoid paying a 5,000 euro claim.
So it's not about the money at all. It's about being right.
It's about principle, but a very twisted principle. It reinforces the idea that the state views the citizen as an enemy, a hostile party to be defeated in a juridical fight rather than a constituent who actually needs help.
Leijten actually makes a direct plea in the interview to Sandra Paulman about this, doesn't she?
Yes, Sandra Paulman was the original internal whistleblower.
Right. She warned about this scandal years ago and was totally ignored.
Exactly. But now she's actually in a position of authority to help with the recovery. So Leijten publicly urges her to have a stiff back and to stop the use of the state attorney against victims immediately.
It's a real test of whether the system can actually change its instincts.
Yeah.
The frustrating thing is, reading through this, it seems like Leijten actually had a solution for all this bureaucracy. She talks about a one-stop solution to cut through all that salami slicing.
She did, and this is the part that will make you want to scream. She championed a method called the one-stop shop.
Okay, how did that work?
The idea was brilliantly simple. A victim comes in, they sit at a table with a team of officials, all the decision makers are in one room, they look at the file together, they hear the victim's story, they make a decision, they pay. Case closed in one single day.
That sounds perfect. It's efficient, it's human, it's fast.
And they tested it. They ran a pilot program, and guess what? It worked beautifully.
Of course it did.
Families were relieved, files were closed, people literally cried with joy because the nightmare was finally over. It was a massive success.
So why isn't that the standard operating procedure right now?
Because the bureaucracy killed it.
Why on earth would you stop the one thing that was actually working?
Officials claimed it went too fast. They argued it was juridically impossible or just too risky.
Too risky for who?
For the system. Leijten explains the twisted logic here. The system is terrified of precedent. They are terrified that if they move fast and rely on human judgment, they might accidentally give someone 2,000 euros too much.
So they would rather spend 30,000 euros investigating a case to ensure it's mathematically perfect than risk a small overpayment in the citizen's favor.
Exactly. It's that risk aversion again. They prioritize bureaucratic perfection over moral resolution.
It's wild.
Even after Parliament voted for it, Motion 150, and Leijten literally amended the law to make this one-stop shop completely legal, the system resisted. State secretaries were advised by their top officials to ignore the law or strip it out.
They view the actual solution as a threat to their process.
Yes.
That is a stunning indictment. It's the system world versus the human world, and the system world is winning hands down.
Absolutely.
And speaking of the human toll, there's one more layer to this trauma that Leijten touches on. It's not just about the money. It's about the fundamental question of, why me?
Yes, the unanswered question. Imagine losing your livelihood, being labeled a fraudster. Maybe your marriage breaks up under the stress.
Yeah.
And years later, the government says, oops, sorry, here's a check. But they refuse to tell you what triggered the investigation in the first place.
We're talking about the algorithms here, the black box.
We are. Leijten discusses the incredibly discriminatory profiling that was used. The tax authority used selection criteria that included things like dual nationality, having a low income, or simply living in a certain zip code.
So racial profiling and class profiling literally encoded into government software.
Exactly. And she mentions guilt by association, too. If you bought services from a childcare agency that the state deemed suspicious, maybe just because the agency itself had messy paperwork, you were flagged as a potential fraudster.
It's like being treated as a criminal suspect just because you shop at a specific supermarket.
And Leijten emphasizes that this isn't just unfair, it's explicitly unconstitutional.
It violates Article 1 of the Dutch Constitution, the prohibition of discrimination.
Right. And because the recovery hell is so entirely obsessed with financial compensation spreadsheets, this aspect, the truth-finding, the explanation, is just being pushed aside.
But without knowing why you were targeted, you can't really have closure. You're always going to be looking over your shoulder wondering if you're doing something wrong.
Exactly. Leijten argues that closure requires truth, not just a payout.
It's incredibly clear that Renske Leijten is still deeply passionate about this, even though she's left politics. She's not exactly retiring to a quiet life of gardening, is she?
Far from it. She is currently writing a book, and the subject matter really tells you everything you need to know about her drive.
What's it about?
It's about a woman who died in a prison in Venlo due to medical neglect.
Wow. So she's moving straight from one fight for the vulnerable to another.
It seems to be her absolute core theme. Fighting for the individual who has been crushed by a state system that simply refuses to see them. Whether it's the tax authority or the prison system, she is looking for those places where the system overrides the human.
So, pulling this all together, what is the big takeaway here? For us, for you listening? Because this feels like a lot more than just a Dutch news story. It feels like a massive warning about bureaucracy everywhere.
Leijten's ultimate message is that the scandal isn't just the initial mistake. Mistakes happen. Governments are run by humans, and humans mess up.
Here.
The true scandal is the refusal to fix it. It's the reflex of the system to protect itself over its citizens. The culture of looking away isn't just about ignoring fraud. It's about ignoring suffering, because acknowledging it would be administratively inconvenient.
It really forces us to ask a very uncomfortable question about the role of government itself.
And that is the provocative thought she leaves us with.
Yeah.
If the government is willing to spend endless resources fighting its own citizens in court, hiring the state attorney, paying consultants by the hour to protect the rules, but claims it has no resources to fix the lives it destroyed,
then who are those rules actually serving?
Exactly. Is the system serving the people, or is the system serving the system? When the rule becomes more important than the result, you end up with a cookie factory that produces inedible cookies.
And Renske Leijten is basically standing outside that factory with a megaphone yelling at us to stop the machines.
She definitely hasn't stopped shouting yet.
Well, that is certainly something to sit with and think about. Her voice is clearly missed in Parliament. But that brings us to the end of this deep dive. A tough topic, but a truly necessary one. Thanks for walking us through it.
My pleasure. It's a story that definitely needs to be heard.
And thank you for joining us on this one. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.